The night was dark, cold, and filled with strange sounds. David sat alone inside his small wooden cabin, which stood deep in the mountains. The fire in the stone fireplace was burning low, and the shadows of the flames danced across the walls. Outside, the wind howled through the tall trees, and every now and then, he could hear branches snapping in the distance. David was used to nights like these. Living alone in the cabin had made him strong and careful. He hunted for food, cut his own wood, and fixed every broken part of his home with his own hands. But tonight felt different. Tonight there was something in the air, a tension that made his skin crawl. At first it was only faint. A low rumbling sound echoed from the forest. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes narrowing. It wasn't thunder. No storm was coming. The sound was alive, heavy, and filled with hunger. It was the kind of sound that made animals run and hide. David stood up and walked to the window. The glass was old and foggy, but he could see the outline of the dark forest. The moonlight struggled to break through the clouds, and for a moment, he thought he saw something move between the trees. A shadow, too big to be a deer, too fast to be a bear. Then came the roar. It shook the silence of the night, a deep and violent sound that carried through the mountains. David froze, his hand gripping the edge of the window frame. His heart pounded. He had never heard such a roar in his life. It was not of this world, and then he heard something else. Footsteps. Light, fast, desperate footsteps. They were coming closer. He could hear them crunching on the dead leaves, stumbling over rocks. Someone was running. Before he could react, there was a loud banging on his door. "Please, open the door. Please, let me in." David's eyes widened. The voice was high and trembling. A girl's voice. But it was strange, not completely human. There was a soft echo in it, as if her words were shaped differently. The banging grew louder. "He's coming, please." "Don't let it get me." David hesitated. He was not the type to trust strangers, especially in the middle of the night. He reached for the iron poker from the fireplace, his only weapon at hand. Slowly he moved toward the door. "Who are you?" he demanded. His voice was steady, but his heart was racing. I can't explain. Please, just open. It will kill me." Another roar split the night, closer this time. The sound of snapping trees followed, as if a giant was moving through the forest. David's instincts screamed at him. Whatever was out there was real, and it was coming fast. Without another thought, he pulled the heavy wooden door open. On the other side stood a young girl. But she was not like any girl David had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, pale with a soft bluish glow. Her eyes were large, shining like silver pools filled with terror. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and across her forehead a thin line of blood dripped down her face. She looked fragile, but her expression carried the raw fear of someone running from death. "Please," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "It's almost here." Behind her, David caught a glimpse of movement, two enormous glowing eyes glaring through the darkness of the forest. The beast was there. David grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her inside. He slammed the door shut and threw the iron bolt across. Almost immediately, the cabin shook as something massive crashed against the walls from outside. The windows rattled and dust fell from the ceiling. The girl stumbled to the floor, breathing hard, clutching her chest. David stood over her, holding the iron poker tightly, his eyes fixed on the door. "What have you brought to my home?" he asked sharply. She looked up at him, tears shining in her silver eyes. "Death," she whispered. "It will not stop until I am gone." Another crash shook the cabin, louder this time. A deep growl rumbled from outside, and long scratches screeched against the wooden walls. David's mind raced. He had never asked for this. He had chosen this cabin to be far from the world, far from trouble. But trouble had come knocking on his door, literally, and now he was trapped inside with a girl who wasn't even human, and a beast outside that wanted her, or maybe them both. The girl crawled closer to the fire, her body shaking. "Please don't throw me out. If you do, it will kill me. It will kill us both." For the first time, David looked at her closely. She was not lying. Every line of her face, every tremor of her voice spoke of truth. And outside, the beast roared again, shaking the cabin with its power. David took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the poker, and stood between her and the door. The night had just begun, and survival was no longer a choice. The cabin walls groaned under the heavy blows. Dust fell from the wooden beams as claws raked across the outside. Each scrape was long, sharp, and filled with rage. David stood stiff, the iron poker clutched tightly in his hand. His eyes flicked between the door and the strange girl huddled near the fire. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice low but firm. The girl nodded quickly, pulling her knees to her chest. Her silver eyes glistened in the flickering firelight. She was breathing hard, almost gasping, as if every moment she expected the beast to burst through. Another roar shook the air. It was so close that the floor itself vibrated. David's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had lived in the wilderness long enough to know one truth: panic never saved anyone. The beast slammed against the wall again, but this time it didn't retreat. Instead, it began circling the cabin. Heavy footsteps thudded on the ground, slow and deliberate. Scratch, scratch, thump. Each sound was like a cruel reminder. They were trapped. David turned his head toward the girl. "What is that thing?" he demanded. Her lips trembled before she spoke. "It's called a gorak, a hunter beast. They send it when they want someone dead." "They?" David narrowed his eyes. "Who is they?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. For a long moment she said nothing. But when the beast growled again, she whispered, "Raiders, slavers. I escaped them. They sent it after me." David felt his stomach tighten. He had heard rumors of strange raids across distant colonies, though he never thought trouble would reach these mountains. And yet here she was, flesh and blood, trembling in front of his fire. "Why come here?" he asked. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted softly. "I saw the smoke from your chimney. I thought maybe you'd help." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For years, David had chosen isolation. No neighbors, no strangers, no responsibilities but his own. But now destiny had dragged him into something he didn't want. The beast suddenly slammed against the door again. The wood creaked dangerously, but the iron bolt held. David's eyes locked on the door, his body tense. "You've brought death to my cabin," he said coldly. Tears welled in her glowing eyes. "If you send me back out, it won't just kill me," she whispered. "It will kill you too." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the beast prowled, its breath like thunder in the night. Inside, the fire snapped and crackled, throwing shadows across the cabin walls. Finally, David sighed, lowering the iron poker slightly. "All right," he muttered. "You stay, but you tell me the truth. Every bit of it." The girl nodded quickly, wiping her tears. "My name is Lyra," she said. Her voice wavered, but she kept speaking. "I was taken from my home, from my family. The raiders wanted to sell me, but I escaped into the wild. The gorak hunts by scent. It has followed me for days." David studied her. Her face was delicate, almost fragile, but her story carried weight. The cuts and bruises across her skin told him she wasn't lying. He felt a flicker of sympathy, though he tried to hide it behind his hard expression. "Lyra," he repeated slowly, "if what you say is true, then this beast won't stop. Not tonight, not ever." Her hands trembled as she clutched her torn cloak. "It won't stop until I'm dead," she admitted. "Or until we kill it." The words hung in the air like smoke. David glanced at the shuttered window, then back at her. Kill it? He had hunted wolves, bears, even wildcats in these forests. But whatever was outside was bigger, stronger, and far more intelligent. And he only had a poker and a few tools. Another roar shook the night. The door shuddered under the weight of the attack, but again the bolt held. For now, Lyra crawled closer to the fire, her eyes fixed on him. "You're strong," she said softly. "You know the land. If anyone can help me survive, it's you." David turned away, his jaw tight. He didn't want to be anyone's savior. He had built this life to escape burdens, not to carry new ones. But as he looked at her shivering form, her glowing eyes filled with fear, something inside him shifted. The beast scratched again at the walls, this time at the back of the cabin. Lyra flinched, curling into herself. David clenched his fists. "Get some rest," he ordered finally, his voice firm. "The fire will keep you warm. I'll keep watch." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." David didn't reply. He stood near the door, the iron poker ready in his hands, his eyes fixed on the shadows creeping under the doorframe. His heart beat hard, but his mind was steady. The beast circled once more before retreating into the woods, its heavy steps fading slowly into the distance. But David knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting, watching, testing. Lyra leaned against the wall, her eyes fluttering closed from exhaustion. Soon her breathing steadied. But David did not close his eyes. He stared into the fire, the weight of the night pressing down on him. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in his cabin. And for the first time in years, he realized that survival would no longer be simple. Outside, in the blackness of the forest, the Gorik growled one last time. The sound promised only one thing. The nightmare was far from over. The first light of dawn touched the mountains, but inside the cabin, the night's fear still lingered. David sat by the window, his eyes heavy yet sharp. He had not slept. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a faint orange light across the room. Every creak of the wooden walls kept him alert. He knew the beast was still out there, waiting. Lyra stirred from her uneasy sleep. She opened her silver eyes slowly, blinking against the weak morning light that slipped through the shutters. For a moment, confusion clouded her face, as if she had forgotten where she was. Then the memories of the night returned and fear gripped her once again. David's voice broke the silence. It didn't leave. Lyra looked at him quickly. You saw it? He nodded. It circled until dawn. I didn't open the door to check, but I heard it breathing. Deep, heavy, like a predator stalking prey. Her lips trembled. It won't stop. Goriks never stop. David studied her, his brows furrowed. He was a man of reason. He needed facts, not riddles. What exactly is this thing? And why is it after you? Lyra hesitated. Her delicate hands gripped the torn edges of her cloak. She looked at the fire as if gathering courage. I already told you they sent it. The raiders, why you? His voice was sharp, though not unkind. What makes you so important that they'd unleash such a monster? For a moment, Lyra said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached up and pulled back the edge of her cloak. Beneath it, on her collarbone, a faint mark glowed faintly, like a silver star etched into her skin. David leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What is that? It's a seal, she whispered. A royal seal, my family. We were leaders once. My people followed us. The raiders knew if they captured me, they could control others. But I escaped. To them, I am not just a runaway. I am a stolen prize. David leaned back, silent for a moment. The pieces were falling together. She wasn't just any alien girl. She was someone valuable, someone dangerous to shelter. You brought their war to my door, he said grimly. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I had no choice. If they catch me, they will enslave me. If the beast kills me, they win. You were the only hope I had left. David turned his gaze to the shuttered window. Outside, the forest was unnaturally quiet. Even the birds refused to sing. He rubbed his forehead with a tired hand. He had chosen solitude to escape the chaos of the galaxy, and now chaos had walked into his home and begged for help. Why should I risk my life for you? He asked flatly. Her voice broke as she whispered, because you're human. He blinked at her words. Lyra continued, her tone desperate but sincere. Humans, I've heard stories about you. Even among the stars, they say humans are different. Brave, stubborn, and full of heart. You fight for others when no one else will. I prayed those stories were true. David's chest tightened. He didn't see himself as a hero. He was just a man who wanted peace. And yet something about her words stirred a fire deep inside him. Before he could answer, the cabin shook violently. A loud crash came from the back wall and splinters of wood flew across the room. The beast was attacking again. Lyra gasped and scrambled back, her eyes wide with terror. David grabbed the iron poker, though he knew it was useless against such a monster. The growl outside was deafening, so close it felt as if the beast was breathing down their necks. The wall cracked, a long, jagged line splitting the wooden planks. Dust filled the air. The Gorik's massive claws punched through for a brief second before pulling back. It's breaking in, Lyra cried. David's mind raced. He couldn't hold the cabin much longer. He needed a plan. He looked at her. You said it fears fire? She nodded quickly, trembling. Yes, fire and bright light. It hates them. David glanced at the fireplace, then at the lanterns hanging unused near the shelves. He began pulling them down, his movements quick and sharp. Then we'll give it something to fear. Lyra crawled closer, watching him light one lantern after another. Flames flickered to life, casting strong light across the cabin. For the first time, a spark of hope appeared in her eyes. The beast slammed against the cabin again, but this time David roared back, holding one lantern high. Come closer and burn, he shouted into the shadows. The growl outside grew deeper, angrier, but the sound of retreating footsteps followed. The Gorik pulled back into the forest, snarling as if to promise it would return. The cabin fell silent once more, save for the crackle of flames. David's chest rose and fell heavily, sweat dripping down his forehead. Lyra stared at him with wide eyes. "You're not like others," she whispered. "You didn't run." David set the lantern down and sat heavily on the chair, his hands trembling slightly though his face stayed calm. "Don't thank me yet," he muttered. "That thing isn't finished. And neither are the raiders." Lyra's expression softened. For the first time, a weak but genuine smile touched her lips. "Then we'll fight together." David didn't reply, but in his heart he knew the truth. He was no longer alone in this fight. And the longer she stayed, the deeper he was being pulled into a war he had tried so hard to avoid. The morning passed slowly, each hour thick with silence. David patched the cracked wall with spare planks, though he knew it was useless against claws as large as swords. His hands worked fast, but his mind never stopped racing. Lyra sat near the fire, hugging her knees. She watched him with worried eyes. Every sound outside, the wind, the creak of trees, even the flutter of a bird made her flinch. Finally, David broke the silence. "This cabin won't survive another attack. The next time it comes, it'll break through." Lyra swallowed hard. "It won't stop. The Gorak always finishes its hunt." David set down his hammer and faced her. "Then we can't wait for it. We fight back." Her eyes widened. "Fight the Gorak? That's suicide." David's expression stayed calm, but his voice was firm. "I've lived in these mountains all my life. I know the land. My father taught me to hunt creatures bigger than me. We'll use fire, traps, and the forest itself. That thing is strong, but it's still flesh and blood." Lyra stared at him, torn between fear and hope. "If we fail, we won't," David cut in. "Not if we're smart." She hesitated, then slowly nodded. "What do you need me to do?" David's gaze softened slightly. "First, tell me everything you know about this beast. Its strengths, its weaknesses." Lyra took a shaky breath. "The Gorak is bred for one purpose, to kill. Its senses are sharp. It can smell fear, track by blood, and run for days without rest. Its skin is thick, almost like armor, but its eyes and mouth are vulnerable. And fire makes it hesitate. It hates the light." David absorbed every word. "Good. Then fire is our weapon." He moved to a corner of the cabin, pulling out old hunting tools. There were coils of rope, rusty bear traps, and a half-broken crossbow. Lyra watched as he laid everything out on the table. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. "Building a plan," David replied. "There's an old pit in the woods dug by my father long ago. We used it to trap bears. If we lure the Gorak there, we might have a chance. But we'll need fire to drive it where we want." Lyra's eyes flickered with both fear and admiration. She had run for days, only thinking of escape. But this human, this stranger, was already thinking of how to fight back. "Won't it sense the trap?" she asked. "Maybe," David admitted. "But it's proud. Predators like it always think they're the hunters. We'll make it believe we're the prey. Then we turn the tables." For the first time, a faint spark lit in Lyra's silver eyes. "You really think we can kill it?" David tightened the rope around a lantern, testing its strength. "We don't have a choice." That evening, the forest grew darker than usual. Thick clouds hid the moon, leaving only shadows. David and Lyra stood near the cabin's edge, their breaths misting in the cold air. David carried 2 lanterns and a bundle of torches. Lyra clutched a small dagger he had given her, though it looked tiny in her hands. "Stay close," David whispered. Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes darting through the darkness. They moved carefully through the trees. Every crunch of leaves sounded too loud, every snap of a twig too sharp. David's ears strained for any sign of the beast. It didn't take long. A growl rolled through the forest, deep and menacing. 2 glowing eyes appeared between the trees, locking on them with murderous intent. Lyra gasped softly, but David raised his torch high. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Let it follow." The Gorak stepped into view. Its body was massive, covered in dark, scaled flesh. Its claws gleamed in the torchlight and its jaws dripped with saliva. It growled again, the sound vibrating through the ground. David's grip tightened on the torch. He stepped back slowly, guiding Lyra toward the pit. The beast followed, its heavy footsteps shaking the earth. "Faster," David whispered. They weaved between trees, the beast crashing behind them, snapping branches like twigs. Lyra's heart pounded so loudly she feared the creature could hear it. She stumbled once, but David caught her arm, pulling her forward. At last they reached the clearing. The pit lay ahead, covered by leaves and branches. David's father had dug it deep enough to swallow a bare hole. Now it was their only hope. David raised his torch high and shouted, "Come on, monster! Come and get us!" The Gorik roared, charging forward with terrifying speed. Lyra clutched her dagger, trembling. The ground shook as the beast thundered closer. At the last moment, David and Lyra dove to the side. The Gorik lunged straight ahead, and the ground gave way. A thunderous crash echoed as the beast fell into the pit, roaring with rage. Dirt and leaves flew into the air. For a moment, the night was filled with the sound of claws scraping against stone, trying to climb out. Lyra's chest heaved as she stared at the pit. "We did it," she whispered, but David's face stayed grim. He held his torch tighter, peering into the darkness. The Gorik's glowing eyes still burned below, full of fury. "This fight isn't over," he said. "Not until that thing is dead." The night trembled with the roar of the beast. From the bottom of the pit, the Gorik thrashed violently, its claws striking against the stone walls. The ground shook with every blow. Dirt and small rocks slid down into the hole as the monster fought to escape. Lyra stood frozen at the edge, her silver eyes wide. "It's too strong," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It will climb out." David's face was grim, his torch held high. Sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cold night air. "Not if we stop it first." The Gorik's glowing eyes turned upward, locking onto them with pure hatred. It leapt, its massive claws scraping the edge. David pulled Lyra back just in time as dirt flew across the clearing. The creature's roar ripped through the forest, sending birds scattering into the sky. "We can't wait," David said sharply. "We finish it here." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "How? It's too big." "With fire," David cut in. He dropped one torch onto the beast, the flame hissing against its armored skin. The Gorik shrieked in rage, twisting violently as smoke rose from its flesh. David lit another torch and thrust it toward Lyra. "Take this. Don't drop it, no matter what." Her trembling hands wrapped around the wood. For a moment she stared at him, fear and trust warring in her eyes. Then she nodded. Together they circled the pit, throwing down burning branches, lanterns, anything that could catch fire. The flames grew brighter, surrounding the beast in a ring of light. The Gorik howled, its voice filled with fury, but still it fought. With terrifying power it leapt again, its claws slamming onto the edge. The ground cracked under its weight. Lyra screamed as one claw nearly reached her leg. David yanked her back, his muscles straining. "Stay behind me," he shouted. The beast climbed halfway out, its massive jaws snapping. Fire burned across its back, but it only grew angrier. David's mind raced. He needed a weapon stronger than a torch. He spotted the old crossbow lying nearby, half rusted but still intact. Without thinking, he grabbed it and checked the string. It was weak but usable. He searched the ground for bolts, but there were none. His eyes darted to the pile of sharpened stakes he had prepared for traps. It was a risk, but risks were all he had. David picked up a thick stake, forced it into the crossbow, and aimed at the beast's eye. The Gorik roared, pulling itself higher, its jaws gaping wide. "Come on," David muttered under his breath. "One chance," he fired. The stake flew straight, striking the Gorik's glowing eye. A terrible scream shook the clearing as blood and smoke burst from the wound. The beast fell back into the pit, thrashing wildly. Lyra gasped, clutching the torch tighter. "You heard it!" David reloaded with another stake. "Not enough." The Gorik slammed against the walls again, blinded on one side but even more dangerous. Its roar echoed through the trees, a sound of rage that promised revenge. David fired again, aiming for the other eye, but this time the beast twisted, and the stake glanced off its thick hide. The crossbow snapped under the strain, breaking in his hands. "Damn it!" he growled, throwing it aside. The beast leapt again, one claw hooking onto the edge. Lyra screamed as its head rose from the pit, jaws snapping only feet away. In that desperate moment, Lyra acted. She thrust her torch forward with both hands, jamming it into the beast's open mouth. Flames licked its throat as the Gorik roared in pain. Smoke poured from its jaws as it recoiled, thrashing harder than ever. David's eyes widened at her courage. "Good, don't stop." Lyra held the torch firm, though her arms shook with the effort. The fire scorched the beast's mouth, driving it back into the pit once more. David grabbed another lantern, smashed it against a rock, and hurled the flaming oil down onto the beast's body. The fire spread across its scales, the smell of burning flesh filling the air. The Gorik shrieked again, a terrible, endless cry that rattled the trees. It thrashed and clawed, but the fire spread faster. climbing its body like hungry vines. Lyra dropped to her knees, gasping for breath. Her eyes filled with tears, half from smoke, half from relief. Is it dead? David stood at the edge, staring down into the pit. Flames rose high, illuminating the beast as it twisted one final time. Then slowly its movements weakened. Its roars turned to low growls, then to silence. The forest grew still again. David lowered his torch, his chest heaving. It's done, he said at last. Lyra let out a shaky sob, covering her face with her hands. For the first time in days, she felt a wave of safety wash over her. She had survived, and it was because of him. David reached down, offering her his hand. She looked up, her silver eyes glistening. Slowly, she placed her small hand in his, and he pulled her to her feet. For a moment, they stood together in the glow of dying flames. Two strangers bound by a battle neither would forget. But deep inside, David knew the truth. This victory was only the beginning. If the raiders had sent a Gorik to hunt her, they would not stop here. Something far worse was coming. The night after the battle was long and heavy. Smoke still drifted from the pit where the Gorik had fallen. The smell of scorched flesh lingered in the air, making the forest eerily quiet. Even the wind seemed to avoid the clearing, as if afraid of what had happened there. David and Lyra returned to the cabin. Both were exhausted, their bodies aching from the fight. Lyra sank into the chair near the fire, her hands trembling as she wrapped herself in a blanket. Her silver eyes reflected the flames, still wide with shock. David moved quietly around the cabin, checking the door, the windows, the weapons he had left. His mind was sharp, though his body screamed for rest. He knew better than to relax. One battle was over, but war was just beginning. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. I thought I would die, she whispered. The Gorak. It was stronger than anything I've ever seen. David glanced at her. But it's dead, and you're alive. That's what matters. Her lips trembled into a weak smile. Because of you. He didn't reply, though her words stirred something inside him. He wasn't used to gratitude, nor to having anyone rely on him. For years his life had been silence, hunting, and solitude. Now everything was different. Outside, the forest was still. Too still. David felt it deep in his bones. The kind of stillness that meant danger was watching. He looked at Lyra. Tell me more about the raiders. Her eyes lowered. They are ruthless. They take what they want. Slaves, resources, anything of value. My people tried to resist, but they used fear to break us. When they set the Gorik on me, it wasn't just to kill me. It was a message. They wanted me to know they would never stop hunting. David's jaw tightened. And now they'll come here? Lyra nodded slowly. If the beast failed, they'll send soldiers. Maybe even worse. David turned toward the window. The moonlight fell across the trees, painting the forest in silver shadows. Then we need to be ready. By morning, they began preparing. David gathered what little he had. Hunting traps, ropes, old weapons from his father's chest. Lyra, though still weak, offered her knowledge. She explained the raiders' methods, their weapons, their fear tactics, their reliance on brute force. They will not expect resistance from one human, she said softly. They think you'll run or hide, David gave a dry smile. Then we'll surprise them. Together they set traps in the forest, tripwires, hidden pits, sharpened stakes covered with leaves. Lyra helped as best she could, her delicate hands tying knots under David's guidance. At first she fumbled, but soon her determination grew and she matched his pace. By noon, sweat dripped down their faces. The cabin was no longer just a home, it was turning into a fortress. When they rested, Lyra looked at him with quiet curiosity. Why are you helping me? You could have sent me away. David paused, staring into the fire. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Finally, he said, Because I couldn't watch you die. Maybe it's foolish, but it's who I am. Her eyes softened. Then the stories about humans were true. He raised a brow. Stories? Lyra nodded. That humans fight even when the battle is hopeless. That you never abandon those who depend on you. David gave a small shrug. Maybe we're just too stubborn to quit. Her lips curved into a faint smile. That's what makes you different. That night the forest brought no peace. The crackle of firewood and the soft hum of insects filled the cabin. But both David and Lyra remained alert. Every sound outside felt dangerous. Hours passed until at last the silence was broken by something new. The crunch of heavy boots on dry leaves. David stiffened. His hand went to the axe lying by the door. Lyra's eyes widened, her face paling. They're here, she whispered. Through the window, David saw shadows moving between the trees, at least 6 figures, their armor glinting faintly in the moonlight. They moved with precision, their weapons ready. These were no hunters. These were raiders. David's pulse quickened, but his voice stayed. Calm. Stay inside. No matter what. Lyra grabbed his arm. You can't face them alone. He looked at her firmly. I'm not alone. You'll help in your way, but I'll be the one they see first. Her grip tightened, but finally she nodded. Be careful. David stepped outside into the cold night. The raiders emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing under their helmets. One, larger than the rest, stepped forward. His voice was deep and cruel. Human, he growled. You have something that belongs to us. Give her up and we may let you live. David's hand tightened around the axe, his jaw set like stone. She doesn't belong to you, he said evenly. And if you want her, you'll have to go through me. The raider leader laughed, a harsh metallic sound. Then you die with her. He raised his weapon and the night exploded with violence. The clearing outside the cabin lit with the cold glow of moonlight. David stood tall, axe in his hand, his body tense like a drawn bow. Across from him, 6 raiders moved through the trees, their dark armor glinting. The leader sneered, his voice dripping with cruelty. You dare protect her, human? Do you even know who she is? David's eyes narrowed. I know enough. She's not yours. The raider raised his weapon, a jagged blade humming with energy. Then you'll both die tonight. The raiders charged. David roared and swung his axe, meeting the first soldier head-on. Metal clashed against steel, sparks flying into the night. The impact rattled his arms, but he pushed forward with the strength of a man defending his home. From inside the cabin, Lyra's voice rang out. David, behind you! He spun just in time to block another strike. His axe cut through the raider's chest plate, sending the soldier crashing into the dirt. The others closed in fast. David fought with fierce determination, but they were many, and he was only one. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, yet he refused to fall. Then the trap sprung. One raider tripped over a rope David had hidden earlier. He fell into a pit lined with sharpened stakes. His scream echoed before silence swallowed it. Another stumbled into a snare, yanked violently into the air, his weapon clattering to the ground. David gritted his teeth. This is my land, he growled, swinging his axe through another foe. And I won't let you take it. Lyra rushed out of the cabin, clutching a torch. She hurled it at a raider trying to flank David. Flames exploded across his armor and he shrieked, clawing at the fire. Stay inside, David shouted, but Lyra shook her head, her silver eyes glowing with fierce courage. I won't leave you. Together they fought. She darted with quick strikes, distracting enemies long enough for David's heavy blows to land. He shielded her from the strongest attacks, his body moving like an unbreakable wall. Still, the leader was different. He moved faster, stronger, his strikes heavy with practiced cruelty. His blade sliced across David's shoulder, leaving a burning wound. David staggered but didn't fall. You fight well for a human, the raider sneered. But you cannot win. David spat blood, raising his axe once more. We'll see. The battle raged, steel ringing through the forest. Finally, David caught the leader off guard, knocking his blade aside. With a powerful swing, he buried the axe deep into the raider's chest. The leader's eyes widened in shock before he collapsed to the ground, trembling beneath his fall. The remaining raiders froze, their courage broken. Without their leader, their resolve crumbled. One by one, they fled into the forest, their shadows swallowed by the night. David dropped to one knee, gasping for air. Blood trickled from his wounds, his strength nearly gone. Lyra rushed to him, her hands glowing faintly as she pressed them against his injuries. Hold on, she pleaded. Don't you dare leave me now. He gave a weak smile. You're bossy for someone I just met. Her laugh broke through her tears. And you're stubborn for someone who almost died twice in one night. The glow from her hands spread warmth through his body. Slowly, the pain eased and his breathing steadied. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, David stood once more, leaning on his axe like a staff. The cabin was battered, the ground stained with battle, but they were alive. Lyra stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the sunrise. For the first time, her face was calm, free from fear. They'll come again, David said quietly. She nodded. Yes, but I won't run anymore. Not if you'll stand with me. He looked at her, surprised by her courage. Then he gave a slow nod. You're not alone now. For a moment, silence settled over them. The forest, once filled with roars and screams, now echoed with birdsong. Lyra smiled, a soft and hopeful smile. "Thank you, David. You didn't just save me. You gave me a chance to live again." He glanced at the horizon, the rising sun painting the sky with gold and red. "Then let's make sure we use it." Together, they turned toward the cabin. It was broken, scarred, but still standing, like them. And as they stepped inside, one thing became clear. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater.